Welcome to The Unbridled Woman with your host, Deanne Rose. Dive deep into the essence of your feminine light, harness the strength that lies within, and rise beautifully into your authentic power. Now, here's Deanne.
Hello, Unbridled women. Welcome to this sacred circle. There is nothing more potent and powerful than a circle of women, loving, nurturing, and empowering each other. There's a phrase that I heard in a song a while ago that really resonated with my heart, and I'm going to be opening up the show with this saying because it's really special. They say there is no greater wrath than a woman scorned. I say there is no greater blessing than a woman reborn. So I like to take this time to really center ourselves. And if you're able to, if there's a candle nearby, incense, or if you're driving, just taking this time to become present in the moment. I'd like to begin by giving gratitude to our great creator energy that dwells within all of the existence, and giving thanks, offering reverence. Thank you to the waters that cleanse. Thank you to the air that brings clarity. Thank you to the earth that sustains me. And thank you to the fire that sparks our hearts awake. And I'm calling in the blessings and protection of the angels to surround this space with safety and love for all who are listening. And so it is. So now taking some 3 big, deep belly breaths to relax and expand our heart. So as we're taking that deep breath in, we're just really softening our pelvic floor, relaxing, feeling our sit bones onto the chair. And then as we exhale, just expanding the heart resonance out to the world. Actually, let's start with ourselves first, bringing the heart awareness to ourselves, and then taking a deep breath again, filling up, expanding, filling with all the prana, and exhaling, opening your heart, expanding it out a little bit more into the world. And one more deep breath in, and then relaxing down, just enjoying the here, the now, the present moment. And before we get started today, I just want to offer another piece of gratitude to our sponsor, Native Path. I have been personally using their products for a few years now, and we are so happy that they are here along with us on this journey. So thank you so much. And no further ado, here as I said last episode, introducing this beautiful, beautiful woman in front of me. She has been very pivotal in my growth and in my business. So I'm happy to have her here sharing her wisdom. And also, I know she's on this really sacred path to connecting back to her femininity. So welcome, Luz Gonzalez. She is a marketing and business growth specialist and an international speaker. She has worked in marketing and business growth for the last decade, nationally and internationally, and has experience with early stage startup marketing, B2C and B2B sales, and B2B partnerships. She spent half a decade working with startups in the Silicon Valley, including her own fintech startup, Convive.
Convive.
Okay, yeah. And she has spoken and trained at well-established companies such as McKinsey and Company, national nonprofits such as the ACLU, mid-sized communication firms at top universities such as UC Berkeley and Stanford, school districts and school systems, startups such as Braintree, Ascent International Startups, and presented to entrepreneurs all around the world. She has trained thousands of small business owners, nonprofits, nationally and internationally, on the principles of branding, marketing, and profitability principles. She has a BA and a JD from UC Berkeley. So she hasn't been sitting on her butt. So welcome here to the Unbridled Woman, my dear. And so we're going to talk a little bit about your journey on becoming an unbridled woman. And then in the second half of our journey together today, you and I will chat on how we flow and flourish as we navigate our life connecting with our femininity. So I'd like to begin each show asking my guests, what does the word unbridled mean to you?
Well, thank you for having me on. It's so lovely to be around you again. And unbridled, I think unbridled for me, the word that comes to mind is authentic, right? Like being in the essence of yourself. And I think that that's one of the most important things that we can do in breaking down the barriers and the many layers to be that unbridled self.
Yes, yes. And I think you really pinpointed there is that the many layers, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Just when you think you're done, there's another layer that comes up. And that's such
Yeah.
the beauty of there's always the growth and the ability or the choice to become even more unbridled, a better person, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I would love for you to just dive a little bit more deeper into your story because when I worked with you, you're doing coaching for business, mostly entrepreneurs, really, I think, and really affected my life in such a positive way in getting me started and really more focused on what I wanted to offer to this world and what I was strong with. And one of the things I always I grabbed on to you because I'm like, oh, she has more of that masculine energy of get things done and organized, and I needed a lot more of that in my life. And then I don't know, did something shift a little bit? And then can you kind of elaborate a little bit on how all that came about?
Absolutely. So I think the the I've had so many conversations with women about the journey that I think many of us are on. I think growing up, we've had a lot of opportunities and we've also had a lot of conditioning that was very masculinizing. It's very masculinity driven. And so as a child, as an immigrant that came to this country with a lot of expectations, with a lot of there's a lot of responsibility on your shoulders. I think from very early on, the messaging that I had was achieve, be successful, like go, go, go. And there wasn't a lot of space for being, which I think is one of those things that I think of when I think of flow and femininity. And so I remember, when I got married with Matt it was during COVID, so it was a Zoom wedding. But I remember so many people, a couple of the people that were giving their toasts for us, specifically for me, saying like, Luz is so, she's such a strong person. And really being irked by that comment of
Interesting.
And so I think for all of the ladies where you didn't choose strength, but you had to be strong, right? Like, I think for me, it got to a point where I was like, no more. Like, yes, I can be strong. I've needed to be strong. Have had to be the responsible one, the boss, the one that always had the ownership. And I said, what if I say no to that? What if I try things differently? Because for me, the experience was I was exhausted. I was so tired of just carrying so many people and so many expectations. And so I think for me, what it took, it got to the point where it was so heavy that I just said no to all of it. So I don't recommend this for everybody, but for me, I think, I had to learn a lot of boundaries. I had to go to therapy. In therapy, I learned about just generational trauma and just trauma in general. And I learned that as I think as women, especially if you're, a single mom or you've had to be the responsible one, and that just was the role you had to have. I think a lot of the messaging was, take care of others, and boundaries wasn't a piece that was there to protect and take care of yourself. And so it was a complete reconstruction of myself, of who am I and why am I leading always? And so I'm still in that journey of exploring what it looks like not to be, at the helm of things, not to be the leader, allowing people around me to step up and to experience their masculinity and to allow myself to breathe and to be like, it's other people can step up and just, it's so yummy to experience like other people's masculinity and relaxing into my femininity, which I think is in some ways, it's like a luxury.
There we go. You got a hell yes from the dogs. Yes.
He agrees.
Oh, a luxury. Yeah. Well, yeah. But how sad is that though, in a way?
It's so sad.
It's
so sad.
And I love when you say, because, that no boundaries. I think I definitely can resonate. And, and I think as women and growing up, I mean, it is in the feminine nature to nurture, right? And so, I mean, we have that capability of nurturing outside of ourselves. And I also think that we weren't taught how to use that nurturing for ourselves first, and taking almost that was the word that got taught. And I guess, especially when I was growing up, was the selfish, right? If you took time for yourself, that was selfish instead of selfless, because you have to do your that old saying, fill your cup first, put the oxygen mask on you first before you take care of other ones. And gosh, like, yeah. And talking about the generational trauma, it's like it got that teaching had to get lost somewhere along the way.
Yeah.
And I think that's that trauma that came up, was that women were not able to be fully expressed in their femininity and their wholeness, and just kind of just kept down.
And I think there's that, but I think the message that I heard, and I mean, again, you read my bio, it's all these like impressive, like go-getter sort of symbols of success. And a lot of my friends have been these like hard-hitting, very successful, traditionally successful women. And we've all had these conversations of the exhaustion and the like, was it worth it? And the almost like this instruction of, I remember I was dating this guy. He was, phenomenal. And there was a moment where I was really sick and he was trying to help me. And I was like, I don't need you. Right. So this concept of like the independent woman, the like, I can do everything. I don't need anyone. And I think I was trained both by my family and by society to be this, I can achieve all things. I don't need anyone. I am going to be a strong, independent woman who, just like does everything by herself. And again, back to that point of like reaching exhaustion, it was like, why? Is this what I want? To this day, there are a few things that just like light up my life. Like my husband, I don't ever open up my car door, right? Like he opens up the car door for the entire time that we've been together. That's just something he does, and something that I love, that like doesn't jive with the independent woman sort of, what is it, script. And then, like opening up jars or that sort of thing. Like I had to learn about the polarities, femininity and masculinity. And as I was reading and learning about that, I realized that, yeah, I've been more in this masculine energy because that's what I was taught and that's what I was expected to be. And that's how you were successful. And I think it's wonderful for us to have the opportunities that are available to us. And at the same time, I think having those spaces where you can take it off. And like, I love letting my guy be the masculine one, right? Like, I don't open up jars. That's the thing. He knows, like, I don't open up jars and I will not open up jars at home. That's just a thing my guy will do. And I love it. I love being able to step into that space of like softness and femininity and be like, yeah, like you're the strong one here. And I love it.
Yeah, there's a few things when you were talking about that, a couple came up for me. Was one question is, so how was that at the beginning when he started to open the doors for you, or the car
Oh,
doors?
I already knew. Like I always knew. So, we met in Texas. The story behind part of the story behind moving to Texas was I was in the Bay Area where I think there kind of society there was this swing against masculinity, like from men, like all masculinity is toxic masculinity.
Yeah.
Whereas I don't know, I'm Mexican and I'm used to in Mexico, like if you are out, like your male friends just couldn't imagine you walking to your car by yourself. It's unthinkable. Like you're going to be walked to your door. There's just like all of these things that I have always loved. And so being in the Bay Area, I was like, I just don't know that this has enough of the masculine men that I am looking for. My friend was like, if you were to be in Austin, I think you'd meet someone, just like that. And so I moved to Texas, where you can feel a lot more of that masculinity. And, we can have conversations about healthy and toxic masculinity and femininity. Wound up meeting my husband in California once I was in Texas, but that was always something that I loved.
Yeah. Yeah. You had the experience of that, before. So it was almost
I
something
was
that,
seeking that.
yes, exactly. It felt like a home with you.
Yeah. I mean, because like,
Mhm.
especially being someone who's, worked so hard, it's those little things that allow you to be like, like, you
Right.
feel feminine when he opens up
Yes.
the door. And it doesn't even have to be my husband, right? Like if anybody opens up a door or pulls a chair, it's just like, thank you. Like I really appreciate that. And I felt like in a lot of our culture, things like that, it's almost like men can be chastised for doing things like that. Which for me, I'm
Yes.
like, please keep doing it because you allow me to be in my feminine.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I so agree with that. And, you know, it is, I think it's a lost art, and it's I women coming into, coming into their own, independence,
Mm-hmm.
that started to shun, or like you said, like men, oh, I can do that myself. And now
Mm-hmm.
men are just like, well, okay.
Yeah.
And now I think the tides turn where women like, I want more of that. I want to be, I want the
Mm.
doors open. So it's like, I think we might have created something that wasn't intentional.
Yeah.
Now we're seeing, oh yeah, that was really nice. That was really nice to be, take it
Mm-hmm.
out on a date, or, and
Mm-hmm.
having things done for you.
Mm-hmm. And
And
not have it be a weakness. It's not like you're not weak because you allow a man to open up a door for you or to pay for the check. It's
yeah.
you're allowing him to step into his masculinity and
Hmm.
provide you with the gift of masculinity, to provide you with the
Yeah.
gift of providing and protecting. I think for me,
Yeah.
it was reading the Queen's Code. And as I
Yes.
was going through the Queen's Code, I kept being like, oh my God, I have made so many mistakes. I have like completely emasculated men in my relationships for the majority of my relationships. And
Hmm.
in as you're reading through the book, she has you make this commitment to put down the sword so you will no longer continue to purposefully emasculate men. And I
Yeah.
mean, everything changed. Like that was the point where for me it was like, yeah, I'm putting down the sword. This is not what I want. And the like the joy and the yumminess and the appreciation that that's opened up for me in relationships with the masculine, it just completely opened up a whole new world.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And for our listeners, it's Queen's Codes by Alison Armstrong. And
Mm-hmm.
yes, I love following her. She is an expert in her field of relationships between men and
Mm-hmm.
women. And yeah, I had that same reaction when I read that book as well. Was like, oh, and I felt that with my ex-husband. I'm like,
Mm,
man, I could have
yeah.
appreciated him so much more.
Yes.
And really, what I've learned from Alison Armstrong from one of her webinars is it's it's really toxic for women to constantly be in their that masculine energy. It's in like physically. That's when you're just like getting run down, exhausted. It actually affects our adrenal glands because we are not made to be in that high do, and our body just starts to shut down. And I think that's when you were saying about you talking a lot of it with your high performing women friends, you know, feeling that exhaustion. It's like, wow, is this really worth it? Right. And also I just want to touch upon is like, just kind of question is like, you know, do you feel that when women are really into more of their masculinity, we actually, and I think we already kind of talked about that in masculinity of the men and stuff, but we're creating separateness in our relationships, right? So, and I think that separateness is like, you know, talking about that independent, you know, women wanting to be so independent, we actually create separateness in our other relationships with others, especially, you know, with men. Yes. How do you feel about that?
So being someone that I love my career, I love working. It's been something that's given me such like joy and I really, it's something that makes me happy, right? So I think of it in two ways. I think of it as when I'm at work, because we all have the masculine and feminine polarities, right? So it's just like, what is the purpose of the relationship? For me, if I'm at work, I am more in the masculine space where I'm there to achieve, to get things done, be more structured. And that's the relationship that I intend to have in that space. Being a business consultant, right? One of the things that we would talk about, and one of the things that I learned from my mentors was, who's running your business? We have multiple pieces to our personality, and the person that runs a business. And so these were some conversations that I would have, I think, with female clients is, I believe, and I think that people can completely disagree with me. I believe that to be a successful business owner, you have to be in your masculine, right? I believe that to run the structure of business just requires it requires structure, it requires responsibility, it requires ownership, it requires all of those pieces. And I think the same is for, you know, for one's career. And so I think we as women, it doesn't mean like, okay, now you're like this damsel in distress and like, you're just going to stay at home and like not take, you know, joy in your career. No, like you can still have that. But for me, what was really important was deciding what relationship was what. So again, at work, it's like, that's when I am structured and because that's required. However, when it's my relationships outside of work, that's when like the suit comes off and the dress comes on, you know, and in a like example. And so with my husband, I'm very clear that with him, he's in his masculine, I'm in my feminine, and I shift gears, you know, or, you know, when my dad was around, like I would shift gears into like, he doesn't have to pay for the bill, but it makes him feel good. He's providing this gift and I'm not going to take that from him.
Right.
And so just really gauging who are you in relationship with and who do you want to be in that relationship?
Yeah. And the word you used was you said intention. What is that? An intended relationship for here? Beautiful. Well, I think this is actually a good time for us we're up for a small break coming up, and thank you so much. I've been enjoying your beautiful story, and I can't wait to dive a little bit more into femininity and the power of us connecting to that and how we can impact the world around us. So I invite everyone to stay tuned and just thank you all so much for listening. You are so valued here and so appreciated. So please stay tuned and we'll be back in a couple of minutes.
Welcome back to The Unbridled Woman with Deanne Rose. Have a question for Deanne or her guests? Join us on the show at 888-346-9141. That's 888-346-9141. Or email Deanne at theunbridledwomanrises@gmail.com. Now, back to the show.
Welcome back to The Unbridled Woman, everyone. I am your host, Deanne Rose, and I am here with the fabulous Luz Gonzalez, who has been sharing her story on her reclaiming her unbridled woman. So the remaining time we have together in our circle, we're going to chat just a little bit more about what we just ended on, just talking about how we can move into how coming into the power of our femininity really shapes our individual journeys and impacts the world around us. And I guess a question I'd like to start with that we can just put back and forth here is, I know you were before we went to break talking about the intended relationship, stepping into more of a masculine relationship when we're in our business, and then more feminine when we're coming into our more in relationships with others, our spouses. Just kind of curious, how can we also take, because I'm total agreement of that, that masculine principles, those coming into the structure, like you said, the responsibility that we need to come into in their business. But how can we start taking a little bit of that femininity and sprinkling that in? Like what would be some ideas that we can offer some entrepreneurial women out there, or career-based women?
Well, I think we're seeing it, right? So one of the industries that comes to mind that I think a lot of us, when we think of it, we go like sort of in our gut, we go like, this feels bad. I think it was because it had swung too far into just like masculinity, is sales. And so for so long, sales was very aggressive, very in your face, very just like push you, right? Like just, I don't think anybody felt really good for a while around sales. And I think most things, it's a spectrum. You're going to have a certain percentage of masculinity, femininity, but I think all industries, everything that we do in our lives probably requires some sort of balance. It's not 100% of one or the other. Yeah. And so I think back to sales, I think it was really, really masculine. And I think there are some beautiful things that femininity brings into the sales space that actually makes you more efficient and a better salesperson, right? So one of the things that we actually taught to our clients was listening, like being a really good listener and actually really caring for the person that you were in consultation with. That completely changes the conversation. To this day, if I ever have a sales consult, I am first there witnessing the human, right? I've had opportunities where I could have sold something, but I told the person, you probably don't need to buy this thing. You like, there's something completely different here. And so that ability to just meet the human where they are is something that I think is a beautiful feminine trait that we bring into sales, the listening that goes into it, the caring for the human. When my space is branding, marketing, I think there's a lot of femininity that comes into that in terms of the intuition of colors, but also just in any work that we're doing, any relationship that we have with our coworkers, bringing in a bit more of that like softer heart space to really meet not just the worker, but the human where they are.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And that's a great example of, I haven't been personally a salesperson, but been on the receiving ends of lots of sales. And it's yeah, you're right. I mean, I can feel when the person is listening. And I think that's what happened when I got on a call with you when I first started. Like, I'm like, oh my God, like, you had me in tears. I'm like, she actually hears me. Like, oh my gosh, thank you. And yeah, that is so important, and that's a beautiful characteristic of being a feminine energy is taking you out of it and just being present for that person. And it could be, yeah, I think a lot of industries can really take that into their workspace. And going back again to the word balance. Yeah, I don't know about you, but when I was kind of coming into this more femininity, I went way over to so yeah, the seesaw. Yeah, I went, this is way too floaty and, not very grounded, always like in my imagination and very creative energy. However, nothing really got done. So it was, but I had to be over there to have that experience, to know like, oh, that was a little too much. Again, same, your story there, like being way too over in the masculine. Yeah, that was way too much. So how, and I think of course, everybody's different. So I think we all have, just like, male born have more masculine energy, female born, we have more feminine energy, but I think it fluctuates. Probably depending on where we are in our life as well. So what do you do now to really connect to your femininity on a daily basis?
So I'll speak to that, but I also want to speak to I think conversations that I've had with friends and just with women, it's been, how do I even know what's authentic to me? And I think I even had that question of like, what is even authenticity for my life? Because my entire life I was told what I should be. So I kept building this career and these achievements based on what society said was success, but never like, I went to some really good schools, and at no point did anyone ever ask me, who are you, Luz? What makes you happy? And so I think breaking down, right? So one of the trainings that I went to, they talked about the many masks that you start putting on to either appease people or make people happy or, have the semblance of success or whatever that might be. And so I think allowing ourselves to really look at that trajectory of your journey of life and seeing, when did you and when did you start putting on masks? And I think for me, what resonated was, again, there was that piece of exhaustion, like there's resentment. I think for me, resentment is a very clear signal of something needs to change. You are either overextending yourself or you're not sharing what you need, or there's something happening here that you need to explore. And so it was really learning what those signals were. And, going back to my childhood and imagining, so in my office, I have a picture of like 5-year-old or 6-year-old Luz that I'm constantly checking in with, like, who were you? Like before, there's this quote out there, like, before the world told you what you needed to be, like, who were you? And so just thinking, like, at my core, I was creative, and I was so energetic, and I loved colors, and I loved creating. I loved running around and dancing and singing. And at some point, like achievement and like success that like stamped some of that creativity out.
Yes.
And so I think one of the terms that I shared with you guys, with our clients, was there's the concept of FOMO. Then there's also the concept of JOMO, so the joy of missing out. And so for my femininity practice, I think one of the things that was really important was allowing space for there to be a vacuum, so I could even hear myself and feel what like I wanted. And so just really cutting away. And then one of the things that was really core, like, or really key for at that point where it felt like everything had to be deconstructed. Everything had to just like, be destroyed in some sense for it to be rebuilt upon my foundations, my choosing. And so in doing that, the North Star wasn't what, all the shoulds, like what should I do? But the North Star was, what does joy look like for me? And consistently checking into that question of what makes me joyful? Like, when are the times that like my soul feels aligned? So for me, it's when I'm on the dance floor, when I'm dancing salsa, like the universe is exactly where it needs to be. I am just happy. It like everything is good. When I am singing, life is amazing. And like, I just feel it at a physical level. I feel the goodness, right? And I think part of the reason that we moved to Colorado was being in nature. It's back to that, like filling yourself, your cup with goodness. I think we all deserve that, and it looks different for all of us. But I had spent my entire life following success and achievement. And so the pivot was, what does it look like to build a life that is at the forefront, led by joy? Like, how do I explore and get to know my joy, what makes me joyful? And how do I build a life around that? And how does my life change when that's the North Star?
Yeah, I have goosebumps with all of that. It's like, and you're bringing up so many things that are coming up in my life right now, and that just signals that I'm getting and information. And one of them is the joy. And I've come to learn that unlike, like, happiness is external. Our happiness depends on things external of ourself, where joy is the inner peace, like that. And you said that's the soul, right? So, and I love that, you're like, I need to take this time away. Like, we're talking about the feminine of listening, right? It's like, we need to take time to listen to ourselves. And that is that vacuum. That's that quietness, right? So you won't know what your joy is unless you are quiet and are able to just sit there and like ask. And I love that you have that child picture of yourself. Is I don't have the physical picture here, but growing up, I'm the only child. So there's lots of pictures of me around. And there were these two enormous pictures in our hallway of like 3-year-old me in like this little peasant dress out in the backyard on this ceramic donkey we had. and the smile, the joy, in my eyes, my teeth were just perfect. And like, and I have, it's like in my brain, right? It's ingrained there. And I do, like, that's when I think of my inner child, that picture of that 3-year-old girl is just so happy with her ceramic donkey there out in the backyard. And it's such a beautiful reminder of, like, I believe that's who we are. That's our truest essence. And coming back, like, I love how you're like, what did I like to do? And because that's what's going to bring you back.
There's a question that I heard from someone that I've shared with people, and when they hear it, they're like, I love that. And there are there are only two people in your life that you need to make proud and care about their opinions. Those two people are the 9-year-old version of yourself and the 90-year-old version of yourself. That's it. That's all the people in the world that you need to check in with in terms of, what should I do? It's that little kid version of you, and then the super old version of you. If you can make them proud, and I think this is a constant, right? Asking myself, how am I checking in with both of these? Right. If we can do that right and honor both sides of it, then you're probably taking good care of yourself and living life in a way that's in alignment to yourself.
Yeah, I love that. That's getting written down. That's getting written down for sure. And because when you were talking that, because I visualize things, I just see, I don't think there's much difference between that 9-year-old and the 90-year-old, except some life experience there, but there's so much wisdom. So the 90-year-old has that wisdom of life, and the 9-year-old, I think it has the wisdom of like, I just came from source, so I'm really close to the source right now. So I know what's going on, right? I know it's true, in a sense. So yeah, thank you for sharing. I hope forever listening is just, that's definitely a nugget to write down and to just use that as a barometer, you know, and I think that's also a feminine trait too, is discernment, I think. A little bit more discernment, where taking that time for reflection before the action comes. It's not so much of a response, but like I said, a reflection. Let me like a check-in, right? Let me check in. And I remember kind of coming into in this whole journey of awakening back in the day, and when that's one of the first things that people would like, oh, I let me just check in, and I was like, what the heck does that mean? You know, I never really checked in. I just did it, you know. But you have to take time to check in. Interesting.
Back to that quiet, that space, that vacuum.
Yeah. So what are a couple positive things that you've noticed in your life since being on this journey?
Well, I think the biggest thing is I'm less tired because I've given other people an opportunity to step into their leadership, right? And to be responsible. It's so this, I don't know that this is connected to femininity, but I think it's really helpful. It's really helpful for me. There's a book called Boundaries. And I think for some of you, when I first heard about it 10 years ago, it just didn't resonate. It was so religious, and I was like, I just don't know that I can get through it. But if you're religious, you're not going to have any issues with it. If you're spiritual, if you're like, I just know there's just so much God and Bible, I ask you to just listen for the message and try to put that to the side, because that was so helpful. And back to that, taking care of myself. And one of the best things that I did in taking care of myself, and that's changed, is the ability to say no without guilt. Like the ability to say, or to even speak up when something doesn't feel good. Just yesterday, I got a message from a friend, and I think in the past I would have said oh, it's not a big deal. But just I said, hey, this thing made me sad that this happened, and just giving people an opportunity to take care of you, right? For me, I think I would have just closed relationships in the past where hey, this doesn't work because I'm hurt and I'm just going to leave. But I think that with the feminine practices, just saying for me, because of my background, allowing myself to be hurt and vulnerable, God, hardest thing in the whole wide world. And so that's been breathing into that practice of I am hurt and I am sad and I am vulnerable and I am okay. It is safe for me to be sad. It wasn't safe for me to be sad as a little kid, right? So giving myself that gift of it is safe for you to be soft. It is safe for me to check in with my husband and say, hey, I need you to support me in this, or to check in with a friend and say, hey, I would like this to be different, or asking for those things that feel so vulnerable, that support you in your softness. That's been everything.
And I think it also gives the other person the opportunity to do the same, and for them to kind of look inside and maybe this was something about myself that I need to look at, or you're actually giving them the permission to do whatever healing that they need as well. Finding, I had an experience this past weekend, and I think the eclipse and all that had a lot to do with it. It was pretty intense, my emotional response, the triggering, but also allowing myself to say my voice, in a very heart-centered way, but to express, because my old way is to be oh, I'm fine.
Mm-hmm.
Or that's not important. I'll just,
Mm-hmm.
I'll just let that go and then we'll move on. And I felt that coming up really into
Mm-hmm.
like that old pattern. And it took
Mm-hmm.
a lot, just like you mentioned, like breathing, like, oh, hey, this is really uncomfortable for me to express
Mm-hmm.
myself right now. But my voice felt like I need to be heard here.
Mm-hmm.
And I ended up getting a lot of loving support from it. So
Yes.
it
Yes.
was beautiful. It was beautiful the whole
Yes.
way
You
around.
you give people an opportunity. You give them a chance to step up for you. And before we wrap up, one of the things I'll say is like therapy. Therapy has been like therapy in women's circles and just community has
Yeah.
been so important. I think for me, I had a pretty violent childhood, and so learning what trauma was and like breaking that stuff down allowed me to say, how do I, as an adult, build the safety that the little girl didn't have? And so like
Yeah.
give yourself the stuff you maybe as an adult or as a teenager, whatever, you are like a older person, like what did you need? What do you need? And how can you provide that to you? Because you deserve it. And it's necessary. And there are ways that you can give that to yourself. And I think that is one of the best ways that we can take care of that, like femininity, because I think when we're in defense mode, when we're trying to defend or attack, you can't be in that soft space. And so
No.
it's, yeah, the
Yeah.
tools to allow you to be in the soft.
No, that's beautiful advice. And I think the word that I heard with that is it's a reparenting
Mm-hmm.
concept of, yes, giving yourself things that you needed from your caregivers, but they weren't able
Mm-hmm.
to give to you at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And providing that, yeah, that safety
Mm-hmm.
place, just for, because that's where our growth comes when our nervous system feels safe
Exactly.
and calm. And,
Mm-hmm.
that's where we use the discernment. That's where we, don't react. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So thank you so much for this beautiful, beautiful chat. And how can our listeners find you, follow you? Can you tell us?
Absolutely. So social media, Luz C. Gonzalez. That's going to be no S's, all Z's. So LUZ and then C as in Carlos and Gonzalez. You can find me on Instagram, LinkedIn, some podcasts, YouTube. That's going to be probably the easiest way.
Yeah, and I highly recommend following this beautiful woman and on her journey. You're going to learn so much. So, and I want to please remember that I do love to hear your comments. And if you have an unbridled journey that you would like us to celebrate during our circle here, you can email me at theunbridledwomanrises@gmail.com. And if your story is celebrated during the show, you not only will receive all our love and good juju, but also access to my signature Jade Egg course, The Well-Pleasured Woman. Next week, I'm going to be talking to a really great woman, Lashana Moxley, and she's a woman on a mission to educate people, and especially women, on how money works and how to be sexy, wealthy, and wise. So, Luz, if you want to join me, I'm going to close this circle with a blessing. And may the long-time sun shine upon you, all love surround you, and the pure light within you guide your way on. So have an unbridled week, my dear friends, and we will connect again next week. Thank you, Luz.
Thank you.